Hi everyone. I've been doing a lot of research this week trying to figure out what exactly makes good compost and how would you get good compost. It's a bit of a tricky question actually and incredibly complex, but basically there are about 7 different elements required to make good compost, and you can read about them in the Composting Principles article. So at home in your own backyard you worry about the carbon to nitrogen ratio, the air, the water, maybe putting seeds in your compost. Most people don't have time to spend making large quantities of compost. You just want to get rid of your garden waste, get rid of your kitchen waste, and that's pretty much it. But what happens when you don't follow some of those simple rules? So looking at this compost heap here, you can see how dry it is, and it's going to take a very, very long time for this to break down. You can see though, even under that dryness, there is some nice compost happening there. But underneath here, I've got a pile of branches, and they are taking a really long time to break down because it's too dry. I put some food waste in here a while ago, and it has actually helped the rest of the pile break down much better than it would have without that waste, because that waste has put some moisture into the soil. This pile used to be quite high with just all garden waste, you know, branches and vines and things like that. And I wet it and then I covered it with a tarp. As soon as I wet it and kept it moist and covered it with this tarp, it broke down so much faster. Now it's all dried out now, but it has definitely broken down much quicker. Well, there's a bit of food waste. Now that waste has been under there for a while. So I must have put some food waste in here at some point, and that's why I put the branches on top. So that's still breaking down. You can see how slow that is. But it's still, the grass and everything and the branches and everything broke down so much faster than if I hadn't covered them up and kept that moisture in the compost. This is another pile. This had grass clippings in here and lots of branches underneath, and then it's been topped up with lots of branches and loose leaves. But again, too dry. I also planted some food waste in here, and then a little rat decided to make a nest in here. Deep down under there, beautiful, beautiful compost. Now, has that got the right amount of nutrients in it? I honestly wouldn't know unless we did a soil test on it. This is a great example of too dry. This has got branches in it, and this was actually very, very full with grass clippings, way up to the top here. And it was actually covered with a timber cover. That worked for a while the grass clippings were breaking down and it stayed moist. As soon as those grass clippings broke down, this is what I've ended up with. And I threw these bits of brown paper in here as well from something that I was cleaning out to see what would happen there. But nothing's going on here because it's too dry, it's not covered, and really these branches are too big. You really need to put them through a mulcher if you want this to break down quickly. Now here's one of my bays with a Compot in it, and you can see this soil was level to the pot up here and how much it's dropped now. As the compost has broken down, it's dropped down. And the reason I covered it all with these bags was to try and keep that moisture in the soil because it was just drying out too much. So let's have a look. And these bays are out in the hot sun, which is not really ideal. So that's breaking down to beautiful compost there, full of little bugs, little slaters. But they're good, they're all part of the decomposition process. Now there should be some worms in here, but I can't see any. I'll have to go and check when I last filled this up, but this is pretty much decomposed. Oh no, still got a little bit of a way to go. This was a takeaway container. Oh, look at those. That's what I love to see in my compost. The soldier fly. They are the most incredible bug of all time. You can see they have devoured this takeaway container. The plastic's still there, but they're slowly eating that too. But you can see how it's breaking up into beautiful compost. And as all those nutrients leach into the soil around the pot, that's what the worms pick up. And then of course the worms put it through their system and it comes out as beautiful compost. And what's actually really interesting about this particular method, well, one is I don't have to keep digging a hole to put my waste into the compost pile, but two is that because it's a very wet system, all those nutrients are ready for the bacteria to eat and to make them available for your plants. So you'll get beautiful, beautiful plants because of that nutrient content that's coming out of the pot that's been digested by all the other little bugs. And inside here, now you can see how the contents of this on the top have dried out. So they've dehydrated rather than decomposed. You really want to keep them nice and moist so they'll decompose and not dehydrate. And that's what's important in a compost bay as well, keeping that moisture content right. Not too wet, not too dry, but just right. But when you're doing it with a compot in the middle like this, it's leaching nutrients into that soil all the time and keeping that moisture in the soil, even if you're not adding water to it. And you can see down to the bottom here, down the bottom, how that's moist down there. And see the soldier flies there? They're the most beautiful thing. So they're getting everything ready for the worms, basically. A pumpkin vine is growing up in from this kitchen waste, and I've just turned this all with this power planter because this is an easy way to turn your compost if you want to aerate it. See, like that? But you can see even underneath, deep down, there's still a lot of waste that hasn't decomposed. So you do need to bring that sort of stuff to the surface and turn the hot stuff from the inside to the outside for it to really break down properly. That went a bit crazy, didn't it? But it's a lot of work. That's a bit stinky under there. You can see though, it is turning into beautiful compost, nevertheless. So it doesn't really matter what you do. You can't really fail unless it turns into a big sludgy mess, which then of course you have to add lots of carbon to soak up that sludge. I love the compots because I don't have to go to all this trouble with that, and I can get rid of my kitchen waste without any real hard work. I've got a permanent hole in the ground. I can just go and toss all my waste in there and it'll look after itself. Look how the flies are coming to this now. They can smell that decomposing matter. So you don't want this in your garden. I don't like seeing that in my garden. And if you've got a compot in your garden nicely covered with some grass clippings or something, you don't get this. But let's see if we can't cover that smell up. And this bay here, I let all the rain get to this. And I buried some waste in here as well. This tarp hasn't kept the moisture on here very good, probably because it wasn't packed down. Under here I buried food waste and covered it with this cardboard. Now you can see that it's broken down to beautiful compost. So adding that organic matter, keeping it moist, not letting it dry out, and keeping that carbon-nitrogen ratio right is all you need to get reasonable compost. Maybe not perfect compost, but good enough. Good enough for you as a home gardener. If you're a farmer, you'd want to be testing because you want to know what the compost is lacking or what your soil is lacking, because every plant requires different nutrients and you can't know what nutrients are available in this soil unless you test it. It's all a bit of a guess, but just have a go. If you've got the time and the patience and the space to do this type of composting, it's by far the best way you can do it, but it is a lot of work. Thanks for watching.